Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Jamf After Dark podcast, a podcast to introduce you to the people at Jamf, learn about what we're up to when it comes to managing and securing Apple devices, along with what is happening in the IT landscape. I'm your host, Kat Garbis, and today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up time and time again. Some of you perhaps have experienced this yourselves. What happens when you inherit a Jamf instance from a predecessor? So, to help us walk through this situation, today we have Matt Jerome of Fanatics to join us. Matt, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Jerome. I'm a senior engineer for desktops at Fanatics.
Awesome. How long have you been in the Jamf and Apple community?
Ooh, I started in the Apple community circa 2011, fixing broken iPhone screens, and things just kind of evolved from there. I got a job working at a major financial firm doing AV support, and they used this product I'd never heard of called Casper by Jamf Software, and I got introduced to it then.
I'm
And
wearing, for our listeners, I'm actually wearing an old Casper shirt with the old logo from like 20, we'll say 2015. Yeah, 2015 JNUC, I think. So yeah, you're an OG too. You go way back.
yeah, I didn't really start using it until around 2017 when I worked for a major university. And I just got really interested in how automations and everything could make my job do my job.
Well, we're excited. It sounds like you've got a lot of experience to help us talk through today's topic. And I love this origin story a little bit because you had connected with Sean Rabbit, former co-host here, who's now run off into the sunset doing other things. But you were like, hey, you talk about this a lot where people inherit, a Jamf instance, and I can talk about that. So I love that you connected with Sean on that to help make this happen because yes, we do talk about how it happens and how it's a pain. And I gotta say, rarely is an instance turnkey. And I'm curious on like your experience. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been that person that inherited an instance? And what was that like?
A few different times. And I think the reason an instance has never turnkey is that there's often one Jamf admin at a company. And they often operate in a silo that, like, okay, this makes sense in my head. I'm the one doing this, so I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah, like if it's for them, but then what happens if they leave, right? Or the team grows, or
Hmm.
I've even seen it where it's unexpected and they had some sort of personal crisis come up and they were, they couldn't like go back. So then someone else just had to show up and help with this. So and I almost want to turn that question then on its head. What could someone do to help make an instance more turnkey? And
The biggest thing you can do is document everything.
okay.
Anytime I start a new job, I go through and document every policy, what it does, what the scripts are, the packages, the scopes, everything. I make a big chart of configuration profiles, what every single option is, and what every profile has enabled, so that I have a baseline. And then I clone the whole instance to the sandbox. Sandboxes are free. They are testing for Jamf Cloud. Use them. They are your friend. They are your best friend. I then use Rich Troughton's scripts to back up everything to a secure location. So all the scripts, packages, payloads, advanced searches, groups, really anything you can download and get through the API, I get as a safety net.
I think that's really great starting points. What else do you have going on?
I then go through the entire setup process as a new user of a computer. I get a new computer off the shelf, set it up the way a user would, or a technician, or whoever actually does the setup, meticulously write down every step and everything I have to do manually. and say, okay, what's doing that? So, say Microsoft Office is getting installed. What installed Office? Is it a package that they got from Microsoft? Is it Jamf app installers or Mac apps? What is it? And then see where can we improve those. And really, I try to make it no more than 5 to 7 minutes of touch time. It could take an hour, but as long as I'm not touching it for more than 5 minutes total, I'm happy with that.
I think that's really a really great idea. I don't think I know of anyone who's really taken time to put themselves in the end user seat, right? Because we can read the policies, we can see what they do, but then in actuality, what's happening? And I think that's really important because you don't know how things truly were set up, and
Hmm.
until you put it into practice. And I think that's almost kind of role playing, right, with yourself.
Right.
And I think that's exciting. I think that's a really great piece of advice.
Yeah. And then once everything is set up how I want it, I've made all the improvements, everything I want to make, I then sit down and write a run book, or some people call it a playbook, where here's how everything works, here's troubleshooting steps, here's when you need to elevate it or escalate it.
I feel like that's a missing piece in the puzzle. People not really documenting or putting out a playbook. And I think that might be like, right, like it's a gap in communication.
Hmm.
And I think,
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that's something that if I were to just kind of put a different hat on, I know so many folks in IT, and having, worked for a managed service provider at one point myself, it's documentation is so important. I know we would do our very best to document things, but sometimes if you're like the only captain on that ship, it's really hard to find the time to do that, in addition to problem solving tickets that come up
Yeah.
or other projects. Any advice you can give to folks on how you find that time to help document things? Are you using an AI tool? Like, what are you doing to help kind of make things a little more efficient in that? Or are you just like, nope, we're blocking time, we're booking a meeting in with ourselves, and we're documenting it?
That is exactly what I do.
Yeah.
I actually use QuickTime to record it, the setup process as I do it, so I can see it and not have to go back and remember. And yes, it's tedious and it's time consuming, but it's going to save you so much time on the other end in terms of escalations. The amount of times that my service desk came to me, and I love our service desk, I think they're fantastic. When I started, they were coming to me 4, 5, 6 times a week with questions of how to do things. It's down to twice a month. They come to
Wow.
me because we have that documentation. And I
Are-
take screenshots and I'll give them videos, and it's stored locally so that anyone in the company can access it. There's nothing private in there that people shouldn't see. And if they shouldn't see it, they shouldn't be doing that work.
right. I know I worked for a managed service provider. I believe you worked for a managed service provider at one point. So you
I
also had the
did.
experience, yeah, of like supporting lots of different types of customers, different industries. And it sounds like you might have maybe inherited an instance or two there. I'd be curious on some of the things you might have seen. Perhaps you saw some interesting things, in that prior role.
Ooh, yeah. I've seen makeshift DLP where
Okay.
they try to capture what was edited version to version based on, I don't even remember what they tried to base on, but it just didn't make sense. And like, there's products out there that you are partially paying for that will do this for you. Too many packages, old packages, different versions for different things. There's not a lot of need to upload packages anymore unless the app requires it. I know apps like Qualys have, you need to upload that app in a PKG format. It's just unnecessary evil.
Yeah.
But you can use things like Installameter to get the latest all the time. You can use things like Jamf app installers if you want to go that route. Uploading individual OSs. Yes, there are use cases if you need to cache or do things like that. But when we have things like Nudge and Superman, you can use these. And our finance team loves these because we're getting more efficient without paying extra fees.
Right.
And one of the big things I do is once I get everything squared away and once I've backed up everything, I use prune to strip out what's not needed and not used. But because I have that backup, we're good. And I did do that once and I removed a package that I thought we didn't need. But I said, hold on, give me 5 minutes. It was back because I made that backup.
How are you making that backup? Is it just like a backup image or what does that entail?
I use Rich Trouton's backup scripts.
Rich Trouton, such a
Yeah,
helpful person.
he is an amazing human being. If you haven't checked out his GitHub, you'll make your life easier by doing that. And I backed it up to some secure storage locations that we have. So
Perfect.
all I need to do is go in, grab it, re-upload it, and I'm good.
Sounds easy. For those who are maybe hearing about A, Rich Trouton for the first time, and B, where they can potentially find some of these helpful resources, do you have the link handy that you can verbalize for our listeners that may be unfamiliar and tuning in?
I don't have them handy, but they are all channels in the Mac admin Slack,
Perfect.
and I think we can put them in the show notes. Sorry,
Yeah.
Merlin, I don't know if we can do. I can say that.
No, we'll put them in the episode description notes then. We'll put a link there. And at the very least, I just did a simple Google search of Rich Trouton GitHub and it popped up right away. But we will link our listeners because it sounds like a really helpful resource to just streamline things. I think that's like such a big challenge. And speaking of challenges, we talked a little bit about lack of documentation. What are some other common challenges in inheriting an instance?
I think I mentioned this before, but trying to determine what's in someone else's brain.
Mm, yeah,
And the term best practice gets thrown around a lot. What's the best practice for macOS updates, for installing things? And I really don't like that term. I actually prefer to tell us what's best for your organization because you might want to use Jamf apps because they just send the update right away. But for another organization, they might not want that. They might say, oh, that's too many notifications. We want it on like a 30-day cadence. So a different tool might be the best practice for your organization. We talked about lack of documentation, siloed knowledge.
yeah.
You know, if you are one department, yes, you're one department, you need to focus on your department, but you're also part of a larger organization that you have to complete the organization's mission. Most of my Mac users are engineers, are software engineers, database admins, more technical roles. I often think that my job is to make their job easier and make it so they can do their job. So that's why I'm not afraid to say, like, hey, service desk or hey, direct support local support teams, here's how to do these things so I can focus on the larger projects.
I think that's really great, and it's interesting because you're trying to figure out it changes that mindset, right? Like my way versus how things are. And I love that you mentioned doing it for the greater org. What is your strategy? Would you say to solve it, and what advice would you give to listeners to really make things work for them?
Try to do it the way you think it can be most effective for your org, going back to the what's best for your organization versus the way someone tells you to do it. Because the questions I always ask is what problem are we trying to solve here? And how do we define success? Because if you ask those two questions, there's a bunch of different ways you can get there.
Yeah,
A great example is macOS updates. The problem we're trying to solve is people not updating their computers. Criteria for success is we have up to date computers. Yes, you can throw in, like, I want this percentage of computers up to date on one of these versions, all those different kind of things. But how you get there is what needs to be decided. You can use Nudge, you can use Superman, you can have users just do it on their own. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And the way you do it is going to depend on your environment. But once you decide on a method, document it, make sure you have backups, all of those things.
I'm feeling a little attacked because in the last episode I did mention that I was terrible at backing things, or I was terrible at doing the updates on time, and I've been on a naughty list here or there, so, feeling a little attacked, but I also think I'm just
It's
joking.
okay. I don't work at Jamf.
But I love that. So, talked about so document, right? Document it all, back it up. Any other, like, methods or things that you're doing that could be helpful?
Yeah, we kind of came up with something called, I call the hero method, HERO. Make your system healthy, efficient, reliable, and optimized.
Ooh, I love that. Unpack that for us. Tell us all about that. That sounds great. I love the
um,
acronym.
I did actually write a Jamf Tech Thoughts blog about this. There's more information out there. But healthy is make sure if you use packages, make sure they're up to date. If you're using a script, say set up your Mac or install the emitter, like I mentioned, make sure you're using the latest version. Healthy, up to date. Efficient means are you installing things in the best way? So if you're using an app, let's say CrowdStrike, which is a very, everyone knows CrowdStrike, it requires a configuration profile in a lot of cases. Are you deploying the package before the config or the config before the package? Which is more efficient? I would argue you want to install the configuration first. So if there's any notifications, they're silenced to the user. If you're using a tool like Set Up Your Mac or Setup Manager, is it launching every time it's supposed to?
Mhm.
Is it not launching when it's not supposed to? Looking at making sure it's reliable. If you're using Installameter, are you getting the right files? Is everything looking how you want it to? And optimize is just the result of that. If everything is healthy and efficient and reliable, you basically have an optimized system. It's going to be able to run efficiently, run reliably, and everyone gets happier.
I love that. I think it's a nice rubric to help folks just kind of find their way if they're kind of doing that initial detective forensic work of, okay, this is what I have, this is what I need to do. It reminds me a little bit when I bought my townhome. I knew there were going to be issues. I knew things would not be to my standard or to my liking. So, you kind of inspect, right? You hire someone to either help inspect you or you do it yourself and just kind of start figuring things out like, oh, okay, this doesn't work or I hate this tile, right? It could be a big thing like
Right,
there's a plumbing thing upstairs that we need to sort or this wallpaper has to go. And I feel like that's kind of what you're doing when you're inheriting an instance, but you're following a procedure to help you get to the result that you need quickly and efficiently.
right.
That will really help. What are people not thinking about when they're inheriting an instance? Like, what questions are people maybe not asking themselves, or maybe they're just not considering to help them get to be successful? I think there's this balance of, okay, I got this, because rarely is it ever like, this is the most perfect turnkey thing ever. Like that, I'm just going to say that never really happens. So I'm curious, like, what are they not thinking about when they get an instance?
The biggest thing is time. It's going to take longer than you think. I would budget 6 months to get your Jamf instance to where you want it to be. And the reason I say 6 months is you need to trial and error, test what's working, what doesn't work. Again, define what success means and what problems you're trying to solve. Because problems will come up when you're trying to solve other problems. So if you're using Jamf Connect, okay, it deploys. Wait, what version are we deploying? How do we make sure that version is up to date? Do we want to use the new features available with those new versions, but those new versions require a different configuration profile, maybe? So it's taking all of those things into account. Use your sandbox.
Yeah.
It's your best friend. And don't test on production computers. I know it's tempting. I know we've all done it at one point, but you'll make your life easier if you don't.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things because then if something does go wrong, no matter how great you are, if something really does go wrong, it's your neck on the line, and it's like, why bother with that? Why, and create more problems for yourself, that you have to now solve.
Yeah. And yes, it is your job to manage Jamf, but you're not the only stakeholder. There's information security, there's finance, there's leadership. Oftentimes, I've heard as people view them as a blocker or the quote unquote enemy. Your job gets easier if you work with them versus against them.
Yeah.
I meet with my InfoSec team every 2 weeks, and we talk about whatever we need to talk about. I run by them everything that I'm doing, making sure that I'm not inadvertently causing a security because they know more about security than I do. I probably know more about MDM than they do. We each have our specialties, so we utilize those to make sure everything is healthy and efficient, reliable and optimized.
What would you say then is success? Like if you were to simply define success in after doing all these things?
Is the work I've done doing my job for me?
Yeah.
I've put in all these automations for enrollment, for patching, for security. Are all those things hitting my criteria for success? Yes, I will have to have hands on keyboards. I will be tweaking things and fine tuning forever. But is my efforts doing things for me and for my teams?
I think that's a really great outlook to have. And I also like that you had mentioned a moment ago that you are working with other teams that people perceive to be as blockers,
Hmm.
because it is one of those situations where you're going to have more success with more people on your team and agreeing with what you're doing versus like, what are you doing this for? So it sounds like if there isn't a relationship there that to be established, I think there's an opportunity for that. And I feel like you're kind of the perfect like Jamf nation child that's basically saying like communication. So whether it's documenting and like writing things down, that's communication. Whether it's building a bridge with another area of the business, it's communication. I feel like maybe what you've identified is some breaks in basic communication that can help lead to ongoing success, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest nightmare is inheriting an instance where there's a million smart groups because only one person decided to make smart groups. And smart groups are great. They're huge. They're greatly helpful. But when there's too many, it's hard to follow what's going on. So name your smart groups with a solid naming convention.
Yeah.
I've done it where it's like app dash the name dash what OSs it supports. So if it's Mac OS Sonoma, I do it 14 plus or just 14.
I love that you brought smart groups up because that's my biggest nightmare too. I've been added as an admin to other instances and I log in and I see all of like these different smart groups and I'm like, "Oh my god." Like there's just so many of them. I've noticed like and this isn't recent. No one's adding me as a Jamf employee to their admins, just to be clear. But historically, when I was added to different um, instances, I would see like so many out of date smart groups where I'm like, this version of whatever you deployed is like 5 years old. Like, no one needs to report on this right now. Like, I don't even think that version exists of this software anymore. So, what other like recommendations do you have in cleaning up smart groups? Because I feel like that's like the monster under the bed when it comes to inheriting an instance. Because I feel like in some ways, if I wanted to really be nitpicky, I could just delete a bunch of policies and just rewrite them myself pretty quickly and start from fresh there. But the smart groups one, I feel like I would love some more thoughts on that. So you had a great example for a naming convention. What else could listeners do if they also share this nightmare of smart groups and there's too many of them?
Well, hopefully you have documented what policies are in place and what smart groups are being used and where they're being used. But one thing you also want to document is what smart groups are used just for reference. Like, I have a smart group of how many Intel machines I have. We're not using that in a policy or config right now, but I still want access to that number. So I document those, and then I use the prune tool, and it will scan your instance via the API and tell you what's not being used and let you remove those items.
Can it do it for a certain amount of time? So I could say what hasn't been touched in 6 months or a year.
I don't think so,
Okay.
but I hear that could be a pull request.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if wishing upon a star. But even still, though, the prune tool sounds like it will help with a lot of nipping and tucking as
Yes.
far as usefulness and just kind of, just trimming in areas where you just don't need it. Anything else that you would recommend?
I know I said it before, but clone everything to your sandbox before you do anything.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a sandbox, contact your Jamf rep.
Go get one. If you do not have
Yes,
one, yeah, go get one. I want to see if you, in your experience, could possibly share any stories. You don't need to give away any information because we want to respect privacy. But I'm curious of like how your advice has potentially helped, and how it could help other listeners.
I did start a job where the predecessor said a lot of things were just impossible.
Hmm.
And to me, that was time to open up the playground of what tools I have in my toolbox. I took it as a challenge.
Okay.
They were told zero touch wasn't possible. They were told updating apps wasn't possible on a cadence. So once I got access to the sandbox, I deployed set up your Mac. I deployed Nudge and App Auto Patch. So we solved zero touch, we
Okay.
solved Mac OS updates, and we solved management.
Yeah, I mean, those are all big rocks too, and those can be very, very time consuming if not properly set up. So
And you know what? It's all about looking to see what's there, looking to see what tools are available, and deciding what's the best way for you and your org. And leveraging those relationships within your org to see, okay, I may think that Superman is best or that, Jam's software updates are the best, but my security team might have a concern that I need to address. So instead of arguing with them, I say, okay, we've got these three options or however many options you have. Again, what's our criteria for success? We know what problem we're solving. How are we saying defining that we've solved it? We go through them, we analyze them, we made our choice, and we did end up on Nudge for a couple different reasons. But it's not discounting any of their option. It's what was best for our org.
I love that mindset. And I feel like oftentimes people kind of, if they're told no on something or they're told we want to do it this way, it doesn't really become a conversation or I like you presented it as options. Sometimes it becomes my way is my way. This is your
Hmm.
way. And then it becomes a duel. And
Right.
that's not really helpful. So I kind of love that approach. And I think that's going to be really helpful to a lot of admins listening in because realistically, Mac isn't the main or only operating system in an environment, and there's other teams and platforms and things to be considered. So I love that you've kind of made it as okay, well, here's where I'm coming from, here's where you are. And you have this meet in the middle approach that I think is also kind of help leading to that success.
Exactly.
I got two final questions for you.
Okay.
One, is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to share with listeners that I perhaps didn't know to ask or forgot to ask? But if there's any like final thought, bit of wisdom you want to share with anyone, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
The Mac admin Slack is probably the friendliest place to get information. You're not the first person to have a problem, and you're probably not the last. And there's probably someone who's done all the analysis of what you're trying to do already. It has been a tremendous tool for me to learn and get information.
I
So
love
if you're
that.
not in the Mac admin Slack, I highly recommend it.
And no question's a bad question. The final question I have, will we be seeing you at JNUC?
You will be seeing me at JNUC, and my friend and fellow Jamf hero, Daniel Ross, and I will actually be talking about this topic in depth.
I love it. So that's gonna be great. So this is a nice little appetizer to, we'll say, the main course, and you'll have to go to JNUC to check it out. So I'm excited. I will also be attending JNUC. I had a session accepted as well, so I look forward to meeting you in person there.
Yes.
But for now, I just want to say on behalf of Jamf and Jamf Nation, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your wisdom with us and being here. Because, like you identified, this is something that we talk about. We're like, we're groaning all the time, like, oh, instance got inherited. And
Yeah,
I love that you're like, I have a way and it's a better way. So I really want to thank you for taking time to be with us today.
my pleasure. Being on a podcast was kind of like a bucket list item for me.
Well, we're glad that you were able to join this session, and I loved all the information that you shared. And for those of you listening, we will be documenting this in a follow up blog along with the helpful resources that Matt identified. So, that being said, Matt, once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
Oh,
Kat.
if you have not signed up for JNUC in Denver, we're just a little over 120 some days out. So I hope to see you all there. It's always just such a great time. I think it's a wonderful investment. So I would love to see more of you there. I know lots of us this month are just finding out if our sessions were accepted. I am wishing you all the luck in the universe for your sessions to get accepted and for you to be there. And we hope to see you soon. So, with that, I will close out and I will just say that again, thank you, Matt, for joining. Thank you to our listeners. And Jamf After Dark is a podcast from Jamf and is copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Technical details and product offerings may change at any time, so always check jamf.com for the latest information on our products and services. You can also reach out to us if you have any questions or comments or even suggested show topics, just like Matt did. And we also love fan mail. All you need to do is send a friendly email to info@jamf.com with the subject line attention to the podcast. We're also a sponsor of the Mac Admins Foundation, and several Jamfs are available on the Mac Admins Slack channel. And of course, if you need support, please visit support.jamf.com to open a ticket to get your technical questions answered. I want to thank Matt once more, and special thanks to our audio engineers, Merlin and Martin, who help me at this time sound great. For our next episode, I hope to introduce you to our next co host. And until next time, I'm Kat Garbis, and we will catch you after dark again. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, and goodbye.